The wind on the high plains did not just blow. It hunted. It moved across the land like something alive, screaming low and hollow as it tore through dry grass and rattled broken fence posts. The sky above the territory hung heavy and gray, pressing down on the world like a lid on a coffin. The air smelled of dust and the promise of snow. Eli Turner rode straight into that storm. He kept his chin buried deep inside the collar of his sheepskin coat, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the slicing wind. He was nearing 30, but grief had carved deeper lines into his face than time ever could. His eyes were hard and quiet, the kind of eyes that had buried too much. He carried little with him: a thin bedroll, a saddlebag with dried beef and coffee grounds, and silence. A silence that had followed him all the way from Kansas. That he had once had a wife, a child, a small wagon filled with hope and plans. Now he had only the road. The blue norther hit without warning. One moment the air was cold. The next, it turned white. Ice crystals ripped through the sky like thrown sand. The temperature dropped so fast it felt like someone had opened the door to winter and slammed it in his face. His horse stumbled as they crossed a dry wash. The ground gave way. A hidden badger hole caught the animal's hoof. The horse went down with a scream. Eli tried to roll clear, but the frozen earth rose too fast. His shoulder struck hard. His head cracked against stone. The world flashed white, then black. When his vision crawled back, the storm was still screaming above him. Blood ran down the side of his face. He tasted iron in his mouth. His horse struggled to its feet nearby, limping. Eli forced himself up. He knew the rule. In a blue norther, you keep moving or you die. He walked, leading the lame horse, step after step, into the white blur. Time lost meaning. Then he saw it. Smoke. A thin gray line rising against the storm. He stumbled toward it, his boots slipping on frozen ground, his body swaying. The homestead came into view through the storm like a ghost. A crooked barn leaning into the wind, a patched fence line, a small cabin crouched against the gale, and in the yard, a woman. She stood at a chopping block, swinging an axe. She was not small. Even through the haze of concussion and snow, Eli could see her size. Tall, broad shoulders, arms thick with muscle. She wore a heavy coat stretched tight across her back. Each swing of the axe split wood clean down the center. She moved like she was fighting the storm itself. Eli let go of the reins. His boots scraped against rock. The woman turned instantly. The axe came up in her hands, not afraid. Ready. "Who's there?" she shouted over the wind. Eli tried to raise a hand. "I need," he rasped. The wind swallowed the rest. He took one more step. The ground vanished. He pitched forward into the snow. Strong hands caught him before he fully hit the earth. Not gentle hands, powerful ones. She hauled him upright with a grunt. He felt her shoulder under his arm, solid as oak. "Come on, then," she muttered. "You weigh like a dead steer." She dragged him inside. The heat of the stove struck his frozen skin like fire. He groaned as sensation returned. She bolted the door against the storm and dropped him onto the floor near the stove. The cabin was bare. No rugs, no curtains. Everything plain and clean, built for survival. She stripped off her coat. Eli saw her clearly now. She stood a full 6 feet tall, maybe more. Her arms were thick from labor, her hands large and scarred, her face sharp and strong, not soft like town women. Dark eyes watched him carefully, guarded. "Sit up," she ordered. He obeyed. She brought hot water, washed the blood from his face. When she poured whiskey into the cut on his head, he hissed. "Need stitches," she said. "Do it," he answered. Her hands were steady, but every time he flinched, she tensed like a hunted animal. He noticed that, the way she tracked every sound, the way her eyes flicked toward the door at the smallest creak. And when she finished, she stepped away fast. "Sleep there," she said, pointing to a corner. "You leave in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." She sat at the table long after he lay down, watching the window, listening to the storm like it was something that might break in. Morning came bright and cold. Eli stepped outside. The storm had stripped everything bare. The barn roof sagged dangerously. Fence posts leaned crooked. The yard looked tired, like it had been fighting alone for too long. Then he saw it. A fresh grave beyond the garden patch, raw dirt against white snow. No name carved into the wooden cross. Just silence. He found her in the barn, struggling to lift a heavy hay bale. "I told you to leave," she said when she saw him. "My horse is lame," Eli answered, "and I'll work for my keep." "I don't need help." He lifted the bale anyway. She watched him. 3 days, she finally said. "Fix the roof, mend the north fence, then you go. Deal." He rode into the nearby town of Bitter Creek for supplies. The moment he walked into the mercantile, the whispers started. "You working for the widow Conincaid?" the clerk asked loudly. "Just helping out." Laughter by the stove. "Brave man." "They say she crushed her husband. I heard she ain't built right." "She's unnatural." Eli felt heat rise in his chest, but he said nothing. He paid for flour, coffee, nails. On his way out, he stopped in front of the man who had laughed the loudest. He held the man's gaze. The laughter died. He walked out. When he returned, May stood by the barn waiting. She braced herself for the question. For the smirk. For the cruelty. Eli lifted the sack of flour onto his shoulder. "Store was out of dried peaches," he said calmly. "But I got the rest. And extra nails. Roof's worse than it looks." May blinked. She hadn't expected kindness. That night they ate in silence. Before bed, she laid down rules. "You sleep in the barn. No questions. Not about the grave. Not about my husband. Not about me." "I can live with that," Eli said. She checked her Winchester before stepping outside to look over the herd. He watched her go. The way she moved. Strong. Controlled. Alone. Later that night he woke and walked to the cabin. She sat at the table, rifle across her lap, staring into the dark. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "There's coffee," she answered. They sat across from each other in silence, lantern light between them, at the wind howling outside. For the first time in years, Eli didn't feel like he was running. He looked at her. She lifted her cup to drink. The light caught her mouth. He felt something stir in his chest, something he had buried. May saw him looking. Her body went rigid. "Go back to the barn, Eli," she said sharply. He stood. "Good night, May." As he stepped back into the cold, the image of her stayed with him. And he knew. 3 days would not be enough. 3 days were never going to be enough. The roof was fixed by the end of the second afternoon. Eli worked slow because of the stitches in his head, but he worked steady. The hammer rose and fell in a rhythm that echoed across the empty land. May worked below him, resetting fence posts with her gray mare, using chain and muscle instead of complaint. They moved around each other like two people learning the shape of the same storm. On the 4th morning, the deputy rode in. He did not dismount. He handed May a folded paper sealed with wax and watched her face as she opened it. "Boundary dispute," he said. "Voss Cattle Company claims your south fence blocks their water access. You got 30 days to contest." May read it twice. Her jaw tightened. "That creek runs through my land," she said flat. Not according to the new filing, the deputy answered with a smirk. Eli stepped forward. What new filing? And the deputy looked at him slowly. You the hired help? Something like that. The deputy spat into the dirt. Better drift soon. Storm season ain't the only thing coming. He rode off. May stood still long after the dust settled. They can't do that, Eli said. If the deed's clean, it may not be. May cut in. Her voice had changed. Quieter. After Frank died, I didn't understand the papers. Men from town said they'd fix the filings. I signed what they put in front of me. Eli looked at her carefully. Voss? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. 2 nights later, the calf went down. The late-born, white-faced one. It lay in the straw, breathing in wet rattles. May knelt beside it, her big hands shaking for once. It won't nurse, she whispered. And they fought for that calf, like it was the last thing tying them to the earth. For hours they worked. Blankets. Whiskey. Warm milk forced down its throat. At one point, they shifted positions and ended up pressed together in the straw, her shoulder against his chest, his hand steadying her wrist. The contact froze them both. Then the calf kicked, breathed deeper, lived. May let out a broken laugh that sounded like it had not been used in years. Eli watched her. She looked wild and fierce and alive in that lantern light. Something between them shifted that night. It became clear in town the next week. They rode in for supplies together. Whispers followed them like smoke. There she is, the giant widow. They say she killed him. A traveling peddler called out loud enough for the street to hear. You could hitch her to a plow and save the ox. The men laughed. May kept walking. Eli did not. He dropped the feed sack and crossed the boardwalk in 3 steps. He grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him back against his cart. You got a tongue, Eli said quietly. Use it to apologize. The peddler choked out an apology. Eli let him go. May climbed into the wagon without looking at him. They rode a mile before she spoke. You shouldn't have done that. He insulted you. I'm used to it, she snapped. Every time a man fights over me, it proves their point. They think I'm violent, dangerous. You defending me just gives them more to talk about. Eli held the reins tighter. For the first time, he understood. Protection could look like possession, and she had lived too long being owned. When that night she mended a tear in his shirt by the stove. Her fingers brushed his ribs. His breath caught. She froze. No touching unless it's life or death, she said quickly. That's the rule now. He nodded. But rules don't stop storms. The nightmare came 2 nights later. She thrashed in her bed, gasping. Frank, don't. Eli rushed over and stopped himself inches from her shoulders. He remembered the rule. May, he called softly. Her eyes flew open. She didn't see him at first. She grabbed his wrist like she was drowning. Her grip was desperate. He stayed. She clung to him until her breathing slowed. When she realized what she was doing, she let go like she had touched fire. I'm sorry. You're safe, he said. But something had cracked open. 2 days later, Eli rode to the county seat to check the records. Yet he found the truth buried in dusty ledgers. A second filing had been recorded weeks after Frank's death, signed by Miller. Voss's foreman. Fraud. Eli left fast. He never made it home clean. 3 men pulled him from his saddle 10 miles out. They beat him slow and careful. A message. Drift, cowboy, one of them growled, or next time we bury you. They left him broken in the dirt. He crawled home. May found him at dawn near the trough. She dragged him inside. She stripped the bloodied clothes from his body with hands that did not shake. When she saw the bruising on his ribs, something inside her turned white-hot. "They did this," she said. He nodded. "The deed is real," he rasped. "They forged the second one." She washed his wounds in silence. Then she spoke the truth she had never spoken aloud. Frank wasn't a good man," she said. "He didn't just hit. He carved." She showed him the scars, knife lines, burn marks, bones that had healed wrong. "I stayed here because when he died, I could breathe again," she whispered. "And they hate me for that." Eli looked at her scars without flinching. "You're not a monster," he said. "You survived one." She did not pull away when he covered her hand with his. The sheriff came 3 days later with a posse. "Back taxes," he announced. $200. May knew it was a lie. They took her herd anyway, drove the cattle off while she stood helpless on the porch. One deputy stepped too close. "Town says you ain't built right," he muttered. "Maybe we ought to check." Eli stepped between them. "Take one more step," he said quietly, "and I'll tear your throat out." The sheriff called his man back, but they left with her herd. That night she unbuttoned her dress in front of Eli. Not seduction. Proof. Proof that the rumors were lies. Proof of the scars Frank left. She expected disgust. Eli stepped forward and buttoned her dress back up. "I don't need proof," he said. "I just want you alive." She kissed him. Fierce. Desperate. Then she ran from him like she had touched fire. Before dawn, flames rose north of the barn. The haystack burned. Voss had finished the message. They rode out the next morning to gather what cattle had scattered. 18 head. Not enough to save the ranch. "Drive them to Oak Haven," Eli said. "Sell them. Get a lawyer." "It's 60 miles, she said. "Well, better than waiting to starve." They drove through sleet and rock and hunger. Men jeered from ranch porches. "Mule in a dress!" May kept riding. In a canyon during a freezing storm, they were forced under an overhang, soaked to the bone, one blanket between them. "Don't look," she whispered in the dark. "Please." "I'm not looking," he said. "I'm just holding you." He kept his promise. He moved only when she moved his hand. He stopped when she flinched. That night wasn't hunger. It was choice. Morning came, and he treated her no differently. Respect. No ownership. Just steady presence. They sold the cattle in Oak Haven for fair coin after Eli forced the buyer to deal honest. A woman directed them to a lawyer named Whitaker. Whitaker agreed to fight. "But you'll have to testify," he warned May. "They'll attack you. Not the deed." "I'm done hiding," she said. On their way out of town, Voss's men tried to take the money and the papers. Eli dropped 2 of them with fists and pistol steel. They rode home hard, and when they crested the final rise, the fences were cut, the remaining cattle gone. A note nailed to the door. "The law stops at the river. Come get them." May's first instinct was to run. Eli's was not. "If we leave now," he said quietly, "they win forever." She looked at the horizon, at the broken gate, at the empty pasture. "Get the rifles," she said. The war had finally stepped out of the shadows, and this time, she wasn't going to hide. They tracked the herd into the Badlands. The land there looked wounded. Sharp ridges of red rock cut through the earth like broken bones. Narrow gullies twisted in every direction. But it was the kind of place men chose when they did not want to be found. May rode ahead, reading the ground. Eli followed, his leg still stiff from the bullet wound, but he did not complain. Pain had become an old companion. They found the camp at dusk. Smoke rose from a fire inside a natural bowl of stone. Makeshift corrals held dozens of cattle. Not just May's herd. Brands from 3 counties marked the animals. Voss had been stealing for years. In the center sat a canvas tent, a folding table, a leather ledger. Harlon Voss stood there, writing calmly, as if the land already belonged to him. Sheriff Brady stood beside him. 6 armed men moved around the fire. May's jaw tightened. "That book," she whispered. "That's proof." Eli nodded. "I'll draw them out. You get the ledger. You can't outrun them on that leg." "I don't have to outrun them. Just distract them." She grabbed his wrist. "Don't die." He smiled slightly. "Not today." The first shot came from Eli's position on the east ridge. It shattered a lantern. Men shouted. "It's a posse!" someone yelled. 2 riders scrambled for horses. Others grabbed rifles. May moved fast. She slid down the west side of the ridge and cut through the back of the tent with her knife. She grabbed the ledger. Voss turned. "You!" he snarled. He raised his pistol. May did not freeze. She hurled the ledger at his chest. The heavy book struck him hard. His shot went wild into the canvas roof. She lunged. Yet she drove into him like a charging bull, slamming him backward over the table. Sheriff Brady fumbled for his gun. "Drop it!" Eli's voice thundered from the tent opening. He stood there with his Colt leveled, steady, despite the tremor in his wounded leg. Brady hesitated. Voss bucked beneath May, driving a knee into her stomach. She gasped and lost her grip. He grabbed a broken table leg and swung. "I'll kill you!" he roared. The wood came down. May caught his wrist mid-air. Her hand clamped around him with brutal strength. She pushed upward, rising to her full height. "I am not a freak," she growled. "I am the landowner." She twisted. A sickening pop echoed through the tent. Voss screamed as his shoulder gave way. He dropped the club. May shoved him to the dirt. Outside, the remaining men returned with rifles raised. Eli aimed at the sheriff. "Drop them!" he shouted, "or he dies first." Sheriff Brady looked at the ledger on the ground, looked at Voss writhing in the dust, looked at the cold certainty in May's eyes. "Drop them," he ordered weakly. Guns hit the ground. It was over. At dawn, they rode back to Bitter Creek. Voss and his men were bound in the wagon. The sheriff rode with his head lowered. When they entered town, silence fell. Doors opened. Faces appeared. People stared at the giant widow who had brought down the valley's most powerful man. May did not look left or right. She drove straight to the courthouse. She walked in and slammed the ledger on the judge's desk. "Here's your proof," she said. The trial that followed was not quiet. Whitaker laid out the forged filings. The false witness. And the stolen brands listed carefully in Voss's own handwriting. Mrs. Gable testified about the bruises she had treated on May years ago. Tobias confirmed he had seen men moving boundary markers. The ledger spoke louder than rumor ever could. Voss was sentenced. Sheriff Brady lost his badge. The stolen cattle were returned to rightful owners. Justice in the West was not clean. It was earned in sweat and blood. Winter came hard. But this time, no one rode up to threaten them. No fences were cut in the night. No torches were thrown. The ranch stood quiet. May and Eli rebuilt what had been broken. They set new cedar posts into frozen ground. They mended the barn roof properly. They bought 2 healthy cows in the spring, with the reward money granted by the court for exposing the fraud. The town did not suddenly love May, but they respected her. Men tipped their hats now. Women stopped whispering as loudly. Fear had turned into something closer to admiration. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable arrived with a thin 14-year-old girl named Alice. Her parents had lost their shack to the Voss company the year before. Her father froze drunk one winter night. Her mother had passed from fever. The girl stood on the porch, small and scared. "You're big," Alice whispered to May. "I am," May said calmly. "Helps with the work." She held out her hand. "We've got chickens that need feeding, and fences that don't fix themselves." Alice hesitated. Then she placed her hand in May's. "You're home," May said. Spring melted the last of the snow. One morning, May stood before the mirror in her bedroom. For years, she had looked at her body with shame, at the scars across her chest, the knife line along her shoulder, the burns. Now she traced them with steady fingers. They were not signs of ruin. They were proof she had lived. She dressed. This time she left the top button of her dress open, letting the air touch her skin. She stepped into the kitchen. Eli looked up from the table, where he was repairing a harness strap. His hair had begun to gray at the temples. His leg would never be the same, but he stood straighter now than he had the day he rode into that storm. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she answered. They walked out to the fence line together. Alice's laughter drifted from the chicken coop. The prairie stretched wide and gold under the rising sun. Eli slipped his arm around May's waist. No hesitation, no fear, just steady closeness. She leaned into him. "I used to think I was cursed," she said quietly. "Built wrong. Too much of everything." Eli took her hand. "You were never cursed," he said. "You were built strong enough to carry what most people couldn't." The wind moved through the grass. The fence held firm. May looked at the land that had nearly broken her. It had not. She had not run. She had not hidden. She had stood in the light, and she was not alone anymore. The sun rose fully over the plains. Two figures stood side by side against the vast sky. Broken once, but not anymore. Together,